Well, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us again for the Jisc Beyond the Technology podcast, live from Digifest 2025 at the ICC in Birmingham. My name is Ewan Lennett. I am delighted to be joined by Philippa Armstrong, Learning Technology Coach at Nottingham College. Pip, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to be talking about generative AI in education, featuring staff voices and real-world lessons. But first off, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Very much enjoying Digifest.
Great, and it's not your first time at Digifest as well, is it?
I came last year as a relatively new to my role. So last year was very much just having a look around and experiencing it for the first time. So this is quite different this time.
Yeah, what have your experiences of it been so far?
Today's been amazing. The keynote from Peter this morning was brilliant, very insightful, very amusing, really lovely presenter. Then I've been to a couple of drop-in sessions and just had a look around and connected with a few of the companies that we use at Nottingham College. So that's always nice to network and see people in the flesh.
Brilliant. So generative AI, from speaking to you, I know it's a topic that you're very passionate about. Mm-hmm. So we'll kick things off. How has the introduction of generative AI tools changed the way that students and learners are actually going about their work and their studies? So what specifically have you seen have had the biggest impact?
Okay. I would say that at Nottingham, we're seeing quite a mixed approach to it. So when I was thinking about this question, we've got three distinct ways that students are approaching generative AI. One is that they are using it in a really positive way. They're using it as a study buddy. They're using it to advance their own work, and they're flying, which is fantastic to see. We've also got some students who are using it in an inappropriate way. So who are essentially using it to complete all their tasks and handing it in without even looking at it sometimes. Then we have the third cohort, which is perhaps the area that worries me most. And they're the ones that are telling us that they're not using it because they're too frightened to use it because they don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to get caught in inverted commas. They just don't know enough about it, so they're not touching it. So I think it's a really mixed bag. We're a big college. We've got 40,000 students. They're mostly FE. We've got about 400 who are HE, so we've got two very different cohorts, and people are approaching it in a very, very different way. And our key challenge at the moment is getting a single message out to everybody.
Yeah, that must be hugely challenging when you've got three very disparate groups who are approaching AI in such a very different way. I'm assuming that's been quite the task to actually get a unified message to engage all three of those groups.
That's what I spend most of my time trying to do. But yeah, I like talking to students about how they're using AI, and often they're quite surprised that we want to know, because in some people's eyes, AI is something, particularly generative AI, is something that needs to be not talked about, hidden away, naughty little secret kind of thing.
So how has it changed the way that you carry out assessments and also deliver feedback to students?
Okay, so in terms of assessment, it's had a huge impact. And the problem that we have is that we're trying to make, in my opinion, what are outdated assessment practices fit in a world where we have AI. So we've still got a lot of students who are assessed on things like essays and reports that are so easily AI-able. And if you are of that mindset, if you're one of that cohort that are prone to do that, you can just get it to do all your work for you and still expect to get a pass, a merit, a distinction. So that is a massive problem. And fundamentally, I believe we aren't going to fix that until assessment itself changes. In terms of feedback, we've got a mixed bag. Some of our teachers are really embracing using AI for feedback, others less so. We've created a set of guidance for our teachers around feedback. We've got some specific tools that we like them to use if they are using it for feedback that are much more data secure. We also suggest that they are transparent with their students about the fact that they are using AI for feedback, which again has had some interesting results because some students don't want their work to be marked using AI, particularly the HE cohort. Essentially, they're saying we're paying for it, so we want a human to look at it.
You want a human touch point to actually go through it.
But then there is always the sort of the way that says, you could get a teacher could use AI to get some feedback, but then as long as we encourage them to always have eyes on that feedback before it goes back to the student, always make sure that they are 100% aware of where the student got to with that assignment, as long as they make sure that they use appropriate tools, that they remove any personally identifiable information, and they make sure that they're safe in what they're inputting to the tool, then obviously there is a time-saving benefit to be had. But it's not for everyone. We've just made some guidance if that's what you want to do.
So going back, because you mentioned you had those 3 groups of students who were approaching AI differently. If we focus more on the third one, which you mentioned, which was the group that isn't quite sure of how to use it, and bring teachers and lecturers into that too, what are the key things about generative AI that you want to get across to those people?
So the way that we are sort of approaching this is we don't have tools that we recommend to students as such. We're an FE, mainly FE, so establishment. So we have age restrictions to consider as well. So the approach we've taken is to embrace educating students as well as we can about AI. They don't need particularly help in learning how to use ChatGPT or My AI on their Snapchat. They can figure out how to do that. But what we want to do is try and educate them as to the power and the limitations of generative AI, so that they're not just wielding it around, using it for everything, that they understand it's a tool. And like all tools, you need to use the manual, you need to read the manual and understand it, and you can't use it for everything. So we've created some resources for our students that help them understand all of those behind the scenes things around AI. And we hope that they can apply this knowledge to whatever tool they have access to.
And I guess mentioning the appropriate use of generative AI tools, they become a lot more multimodal now. Does that provide an extra challenge or extra opportunities in terms of how you best approach the usage?
We've got an AI use scale that we use that's just been, I'm wary of using the phrase rolled out because Peter was very dismissive of that phrase this morning in his keynote, quite rightly. But the AI use scale that we have pulled together, that's based on Leon Furs' assessment scale, that we've taken and tweaked and adapted, it gives our students and our staff very, very clear guidelines of what you can do in terms of different levels of AI use on any given task. And I think that is something that's really important. So students who are struggling, they're telling us they're struggling with not knowing how much AI is okay. Can I use it for research? Can I use it to create images? Can I use it to make a video? What can I do with it? So the implementation of this scale hopefully will really help those boundaries and that clarity of, okay, for this assignment, we're assigning it a level 3 on the AI user scale, which means you can do this, this, and this, but not that.
Yeah, and that leads into what I was about to say as well in regards to accessibility. So making sure that the tools that you're providing students are both accessible and making sure that the students have the right level of literacy to actually use them, which I'm presuming is, again, quite a significant challenge.
Yeah, but as I said, we don't particularly recommend any specific tools to our students because of their ages. We are very limited with what tools are out there that are appropriate. But with the resources that we've created, we're hoping that they'll be able, as I said, to apply it to whatever it is. Because in Nottingham, we've got a very mixed student body. We'll have some who will have access to the freebie stuff on their phones, and there'll be some who are happy to pay to get, in inverted commas, more sophisticated AI tools. So there's no tool that everybody's using. We're saying we're going to show you how to apply a level of awareness and knowledge, the manual if you like, to whatever tool it is you're using.
Yeah, how do you evaluate and review those tools for appropriate use? Because obviously the age restriction part is a huge part of it.
The age thing is probably our biggest concern. Then, of course, we have to integrate whatever we do have with IT. So our biggest problem is that we're a Microsoft college, and the biggest tool that's available to students who are 13 plus is Google Gemini, which, as a Microsoft college, that's not quite
lining up. No,
not quite lining up. Things like Canva, we are using. So we do have some robust processes in place to double check what's being used, but because of the age restriction, I think we're so limited anyway that most of what we're talking about is perhaps trying to arm students when they're using AI outside of college. Or we're saying to our tutors, if you are suggesting to your students to use AI or generative AI for a particular task, they're doing it outside of college, essentially, because whatever we're doing inside, we need to be so careful with the age restriction.
So how can policymakers and institutions work together to reduce the disparities in that AI literacy?
That's a really good question. I think for me, for our college, the way we're coming at it is just education. We've just got to keep talking about it. We've got to keep making sure that people understand, staff understand, students understand the power and the limitations of it, and talk about it in a positive way. There are so many benefits to students using generative AI to support them in their studies. So let's go with that rather than we're trying to very much come away from punishing, catching, detecting. We want to educate them on the positive use of it, and make sure that everybody, whether they're using the Snapchat one or a sophisticated paid for one, they know the power of it, they know the limitations, they know about bias, they know about all of those things which are so important, whatever tool you're using.
So just to start wrapping up, thinking more broadly, I know you're part of a panel later on today to discuss this in more depth. What would you like people to sort of take away from the overall experience in terms of approaching generative AI going forward, either if they're HE or FE looking on?
I think I'm really, really proud of the stance that Nottingham College have taken. Very early on, we set our stall out to say that we were going to embrace it. We had a choice. There's lots of establishments that weren't quite sure which way they were going to go, whether they were going to embrace it or whether they were going to shut it down or block it. We, from very early on, said, actually, this is something really powerful, but we do need to make sure we back it up with education and resources for our students. So for us, we've come right away, as I said, from the detecting and the punishing and the catching, and we're all about transparency, clarity, openness of use and honesty. That does stretch to our staff as well, because we have got some staff who have said, I don't want anything to do with AI. That's absolutely fine for your own practice, but if you are working in the modern classroom, you do need to have an awareness of it, because if your students are coming to you saying, can I do this with AI, can I use it for that? If you block them and shut them down and don't talk about it, then that's a barrier. They're not going to come to you again. We've lost them essentially. So we need them to have an awareness and to be able to support the students wherever. And if we're using the scale that I mentioned earlier, that does help with that clarity. But we need our staff to have at least an understanding of what generative AI means.
Yeah, and the understanding and the experience really does need to be from top to bottom to make sure everyone is empowered and knowledgeable and aware of what they can use and how they can use it effectively, right?
Absolutely. And to have 1,700 staff and 40,000 students to get that message out to is a full-time job. But
not many then.
Working on it. Yeah, across 10 sites.
Goodness me. Well, that's a big task, but I'm sure you're going to be doing brilliantly at it. Pip, thank you so much for joining us. How can people get in touch with you if they wish to find out more about you and your work at Nottingham College?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Philippa Armstrong. Just get in touch that way. And yeah, I'd love to talk to people.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you very much for joining us. Before we wrap up, a quick note about our upcoming event, Connect More 2025. That's our free online event from the 14th to the 16th of May. Education Enhanced, navigating today's challenges with practical solutions. Find out more at jisc.ac.uk/connect-more. See you there.